Hey YouTubers, Croc Daddy here. So today I'm going to be working on this Mep-802a military diesel generator. It's a 5 kilowatt generator. The story behind this is I picked it up from a gentleman on Facebook Marketplace. He said that when he got it, he did a bunch of work to it. He replaced some injectors, some injection pumps, and he said once he got the generator running, he had some issues with the CB1 breaker tripping, which is behind this panel in here. And I'll go through some of that stuff here in just a second. But he said he was unable to get the generator fully running and decided to list it and didn't want to try to fix it from there. So I'm gonna see if I can get this thing running. But today let's just kind of run through this and kind of see what we got. I've gone through this very little, and so come on in here. So this unit's got 157 hours on it. It looks pretty clean. Everything behind the generator looks clean. I don't see any damaged wires. It's got a bag of parts here that I think he took some of the panels off, and these are the nuts and bolts and some of the exhaust pieces to the generator. It does have the auxiliary hose in there, which is good if you're going to run this generator off an auxiliary tank. I am missing the door latch here, so we'll have to pick up another one. And it's got all the lug nuts on here, which is good. Come around here. So I can already tell that we're missing some bolts for the door panel, so this door should slide right off. Yep. I noticed a few things here, and he mentioned some of this stuff, and it looks like this is a new fuel solenoid, or shut-off solenoid, and it's not connected here. The linkage isn't connected, and so we'll have to fix some of that. As he said, as you can zoom in here and show him, as he said, he did replace the injection pumps, and he said he also replaced the injectors, which we'll have to look from the other side, but it looks like there's new fuel lines up there. There's a new fuel filter in here, and it looks like this is your intake air. It looks like this is for your air box up here, and this is your intake boot for it, and your battery hold downs. I am missing a battery tray down here, so let's see what else we got. So we're gonna have to get a set of batteries. I think I got some in on the shelf in there. So, all right, let's look at the other side. All right, it looks like he did replace the coolant in here. It looks like a newer alternator on here. I'm not sure if that was him or if that came like that. If you look in here, you can tell, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but back here the injectors appear to be new. And so everything that he told me seems to be lining up. Now, this unit, I believe when I picked it up from him, one of the first things that I checked is if this engine will rotate, and it did when I picked it up. And as you can see, it's rotating now. And so I don't typically, like when I buy these units, I typically won't buy them unless they have this flap cover on here, because what happens is water will get into the exhaust port. Water will get in, leak down into your cylinders, and it'll lock up the engine. And so I try to stay away from units that don't have that flap on there. Let's see. So some of this linkage is bent, so we'll have to fix some of that. It's got some paper documentation in here, but it looks relatively simple. It looks like it's all here. This generator was manufactured in 2009. Yeah, buddy. I love you too. I'm gonna get some batteries in here and see if I can get this thing started. So I did have some red top batteries sitting in the garage, and I'm gonna set these things in here and see if I can't get this to crank over. just gonna just kind of snug it up. I'm not even gonna tighten them down because this is temporary. All right, here's your dead crank switch. You want to make sure that this is in the normal position. And let's just see if I can bump it and see if it'll start. I did confirm that the CB1 breaker is tripping almost immediately after you start it. We're on prime run. You can hear, I don't know if you can hear the fuel pump running. I'm gonna start it and you can watch the CB1 breaker trip right here. There it is. She trips right away. Another issue that I'm having, and I'm not sure whether this is related to the CB1 breaker, but the AC circuit interrupter is not closing. So I'm not getting any voltage out of the lugs here. I'm reading voltage here, but I'm not down here, and it's not opening or closing the circuit. When I went through the technical manual, and the number is right there, it says that the 24-volt DC control circuits provide control and power for the operation of the fuel solenoid, indicators, fuel transfer pump, and the auxiliary fuel pump. Right behind that is a diagram of everything that's on that circuit. And this is on section 111. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go by one, and we're going to hopefully unplug. We're going to unplug some of these items and see if we can't get that circuit breaker not to trip. And then in the back, there's also further diagnostics under the maintenance of the fuel system, and you can actually, through here, you can actually test. So for this item, this is the fuel level sender. You can actually test with a voltmeter the ohms, and it tells you exactly what the ohm reading should be. I opened up the panel that exposes the fuel tank, and this is how I found it. These two were disconnected, and this is going to be your, according to the manual, this is your fuel pump float switch right here. And when you plug these in, you get a error code on the malfunction panel that says that there's low fuel in the tank. If you disconnect it, I can start the generator, but I'm going to test and verify that. First, I'm going to start with the fuel pump float module, or the fuel float module here. And the technical manual in section 279, it walks you through exactly how to test it. And so I'm going to test it real quick. Right here on the electrical connector, there's the number 1, and then 4 is the far right. And I'm assuming it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what I just have, you know, that spade terminal. The manual says to turn your unit to auxiliary, prime, and run. Okay, you can hear the main fuel pump running. Let's go back around. And it says to connect 1 and 2, and your auxiliary fuel pump should kick in if the fuel float module is working correctly. And it did. And I can feel it. We're also going to test the voltage to make sure we're getting a proper, we should be getting around 22 to 24 volts. Look at the voltmeter. And as you see, we're getting 22 volts out. Okay, so the final step in testing the fuel float module is, it says to use a jumper wire and make a connection between pins 3 and 4 of the float module. The generator should shut down approximately 2 seconds, and a no fuel lamp on the malfunction indicator panel should light. Okay, so our fuel solenoid shut off right there is not connected. So we're gonna test and just make sure that that fuel pump kicks off. And that the fuel float module should be operating correctly. So I'm gonna connect these, and it said after 2 seconds that the generator should shut down. And it did. And then let's go make sure that the no fuel lamp on the malfunction indicator came on. And it did. So you can see that the no fuel light came on. So that does not seem to be our culprit. Okay, so the next step that I did is I'm removing the fuel level sending unit in section 276 of the technical manual. And it gives you the procedures again of how to test this to make sure it's operating correctly. And it said, position the fuel level sending unit in the vertical position similar to the position installed in the tank, which would be just like this. It says set the voltmeter to ohms and connect the positive lead to the fuel level sender terminal and the negative to the ground. Okay, so I'm on ground, and it says with the fuel level sender in the resting freely in what would be an empty position, the multimeter should indicate in between 216 to 264 ohms. And so we are reading 241 ohms, which is almost dead center in between those numbers. 241. Okay, move it up to the full position, and we're reading 33.2 ohms, and that falls again within range of the proper specs. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this. This is not our culprit. So here's the fuel pump float switch. Here's your upper and your lower. You got 4 pins. If you notice again on your connectors, you got pin 1, 2, 3, 4. It says position the float switch in the vertical position similar to installed in the tank. So like this, set the multimeter for ohms. Connect the positive lead to pin 2. Okay. Positive lead to pin 2, which is right there, and your negative to pin 1. Move the upper full float to the full position, and the multimeter should read an open circuit, which it does. Okay. It says with the upper float towards the down position, multimeter should indicate continuity a 1/4 inch before the float reaches the down position. So we're going to move this float down. You can see and I'll tell you right when we're about 1/4 inch, which is about right there. It's about 1/4 inch. And we started continuity all the way down. So the upper's working properly. Now the bottom, I did have to clean. There was some corrosion on here, and the aluminum is kind of, you can see that the aluminum is kind of corroded there. So we're going to test the same. It says the same procedure is true for pins 3 and 4. Pin 3 is going to be your positive, and pin 4 is going to be your negative. And it should be the same. So with the float to the full position, the multimeter should read an open circuit, which it does. The multimeter should read continuity a 1/4 inch before the float reaches the bottom position. So we're open right now. There's continuity all the way to the bottom. And there's about 1/4 inch. Okay, so I took this lower float off. That faces the down position. It just has one snap ring on it. There was quite a bit of corrosion right here, and you can see some of the aluminum is damaged. So I'm not sure if that's going to affect the level of the float. We're going to put it back together and test it and see. So what I've done so far is I verified that the auxiliary fuel pump switch works. I verified that the fuel sending unit, fuel level sender is what the technical manual calls it, that that works properly. And I've also verified that the fuel pump float module over here in this corner, that works properly. Okay, so I disconnected and put them in the end of these jumper wires, and it in fact did trip the fuse. So my circuit breaker is functioning properly. Okay, so I took all the panels off. I checked for shorts, I checked for broken wires, rats, nests, anything I could think of to try to figure out why CB1 breaker is tripping. I checked, double checked, triple checked the fuel system. I even unplugged everything. And the thing that's interesting is the generator's only tripping CB1 when the generator's running. And I went to the generator, the 24 volt generator on the side. And as you can see, 137T is supposed to be wired into the exciter. But back here, it's wired into, I don't know if you can see that, it's wired into the AC tap, not the exciter. I also double checked that with an Mep-802 that I have sitting outside. So I'm gonna swap this wire and see if that fixes our issue. Okay, so I switched that wire from that terminal down to the exciter. And usually the CB1 breaker trips within seconds of the machine being running, of the generator being running. So let's see if it trips. All right, that's two issues fixed with the generator. The CB1 breaker is not tripping anymore once the generator is running, and the no fuel light indicator is resolved as well. There are a few more issues I noticed. I noticed that the AC interrupter circuit is not closing, so I'm gonna have to figure out why that is. I'm gonna have to install a new fuel level gauge and put this finish installing this fuel solenoid back together. It's the next day, and I was able to figure out why the circuit interrupter switch was not remaining closed, and why I was not getting power at my main lugs down there. Before I walk you through that process, I can't stress this technical manual enough. I was able to verify many switches, relays, and connections were working through simply just going through the testing process of the particular item I was going through, and I wouldn't be able to do that without the manual. And so I did a bunch of reading this morning. I got on Steel Soldiers, and as I was reading, one of the guys was making mention that the main generator can only make power if it gets excitation, and the main generator gets its excitation from the main switch right here. As you hold it to start, when you're in the start position, that's when the generator field gets excited. So in order to test that, what I did is, this is switch 1 right here. I went to switch 1. I started the generator normally, but I kept switch 1 in the start position. And I measured the voltage that was coming off of pin 7 right here, down here with this pink line. And I received 22 to 23 volts. And I verified that the switch was, in fact, working. Then from there, I went to the technical manual, and I verified that the interrupter circuit switch was operating correctly, and it was. Then I checked fuses, simple things. I checked fuses. I checked the quad fuse right here. You can just jump across terminal 8 and 7 with a multimeter and verify that you do have continuity, and typically if you do, then your fuse is good. I swapped the K15, this relay, and K16 relay to verify that I did not have a bad relay. And I also verified that I had power at my convenience receptacle right there, which typically means that if you get power right there, it's a good thing. It means that the generator is producing power, you're just not getting it at the main lugs. So I got back on Steel Soldiers, and I did a little bit more reading. And as I was doing reading in a particular forum, one of the main members asked somebody who was having a similar issue, does your interrupter circuit switch have a diode between these two terminals, between terminal 2 and terminal 5 of the S5 switch? And as I was reading that, I was like, hold on a minute, I know mine doesn't. And so I ran over here to my Mep-802. I opened up that one, and that one, in fact, does have the diode in between in between leg 5 and leg 2. I pulled that diode off. I put it on this generator, and it fired up. I turned the circuit. I closed the circuit. It stayed closed, and I was getting 240 volts between lug 1 and lug 3. I only check lug 1 and lug 3 in the single phase 240 position, but I'm sure everything else works. That diode is probably something somebody from the military pulled off of this to rob and donate to another generator they had. And that diode is 20 cents, maybe 90 cents. And if you don't have that diode, your generator's not producing power. So that's the main issues I resolved so far. I'm going to button this one back up. I'm going to do a load test. But thanks for following along. I got most of these issues resolved. And follow along for more content.